It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. This show is brought to you by the support of our sponsors like CartKing.com, Cart-King.com, 877-986-7771. If you've ever thought about going into the mobile cart or kiosk business, Cart-King.com is the answer to your needs. They're a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, food carts, and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients, corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. So you go to Cart-King.com. You check out the different models, the styles, the designs, which one applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, then they'll ship it worldwide. 877-986-7771. You tell them Ed Opperman sent you, get a good deal. And then you tell me, hey, Ed, I bought a cart at CartKing.com. Can you help plug my business on your air? And, of course, I'll do it for you. I'll also give you a free lifetime membership if you buy a cart or a kiosk from Cart-King.com. And then I'll plug your business on the air for you here. Say, hey, our buddy over there in Tucson just opened up a coffee cart at the Tucson airport, okay? And that's what you get. You go to Cart-King.com. Because we're a family here at the Opperman Report. We're like the Manson family, okay? All right. Pure Soap Flake Company. You can bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap Flake products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. They handcraft soap bars and laundry powder and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oil. So no chemicals, no meat products, no dairy products, no nothing, man. Good stuff. Pure Soap Flake Company are kind to, their products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin. It's safe for drains and waterways. You can order today at puresoapflakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com. Give them a call. 218-568-2525. You can also get it at Whole Foods. Go into Whole Foods and say, hey, where's your Pure Soap Flake products? I want them. Give them to me. AlmightyGold.com. Gold. Why save in paper when you can save in gold? The guys at AlmightyGold.com, they understand it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. No one can afford an ounce of gold. That's why they've introduced these carat bars, which are you can buy minor quantities from as little as a tenth of a gram. Each gold bar is inset into a carat bar frame, which is of a standard credit card size and covered by a safety laminate imprinted with unique DNA for counterfeit protection and provided with a black-lit authenticity signature on the front. AlmightyGold.com, they have a cryptocurrency. It's backed by gold. And you get into a gold business. You go to their website, AlmightyGold.com. You sign up for free. You get an affiliate link. You post it on your Twitter, your Facebook, and you get a commission anytime somebody buys some gold. EmailRevealer.com. Get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, email tracing. If you think your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend's cheating on you, and they probably are, okay, you give us their email address. We trace it back to online dating websites and personal ads, and we catch them cheating online. Very inexpensive investigation. First step in any infidelity investigation should be an online infidelity investigation to trace an email address back to online dating websites. I invented that search, all right? No one else does it in the whole world. EmailRevealer.com. Okay, my first guest today is going to be James Pastel. I was contacted by James. I think it was on YouTube. No, he contacted me via email. He had listened to the shows we had done on Paul is Dead, which is the theory that Paul McCartney died in a car crash and then the Beatles replaced him. But I've never bought into that theory 100%. I definitely think Paul was swapped out. There's no doubt about that. But I says, well, what makes anybody think he's dead? What's the proof that he's dead? Why couldn't he still be alive and they just swapped him out? So I was contacted by James Pastel here, who has the same theory as mine. He's been working on this, I might say obsessively, for many, many years working on this. Mr. James Pastel, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, man, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show. Tell the audience, who is James Pastel?
Well, I'm 37. I'm an out-of-work computer programmer right now. I got my first job in IT, working in IT in year 2000 for a company in Virginia called UUNet, and I went on from there to work computer security for a number of years for various companies in Maryland and the DC metro area. I kind of, working in computer security, I kind of got involved with a lot of hacking stuff, and I came across a lot of like spook related stuff, and I later on got kind of interested in a lot of the conspiracy stuff. But my parents, they were always huge Beatles fans, you know, and I was kind of raised on Beatles music. So in around 2006, I think it was, or somewhere around there, the Beatles did kind of this viral marketing campaign for, I think it was, what was the song? George Martin announced they were having a contest to basically decode this album cover that came with the single. And that was kind of the beginning of an effort that was basically kind of made to re-promote the whole Paul is dead theory. Where, I don't know, have you seen any of these I'm a Phony videos?
Yeah.
At all?
Yeah, we sat through. I even tried to contact that guy, I Am a Phony, and tried to get him to do an interview, and he came back to me and he says, you know what, I did interviews,
did
but
you
I
talk
don't...
to Billy Martin?
What's that?
Or because it's not actually one guy, it's actually a group, but there's one guy who I've seen interviewed for that group, and his name's Billy Martin.
Well, the guy, he came back to me, he said, yeah, I used to do interviews, but I don't do them anymore. But he said he saw my, you know, he watched the show, he's listened to my shows, and he knew who I was and stuff like that. But what information do you have about that?
Well, he had the Billy Martin, who was part of that I Am a Phony group, is actually, and he's the Beatles the official Beatles account on Twitter actually follow this guy Billy Martin, just like they follow the other guy I mentioned to you in my emails and off air, who wrote the book Memoirs of Billy Shears, Thomas E. Harriet. Their official account literally follows them on Twitter. But Billy Martin, who a lot of people think is responsible for the I'm a Phony videos, did this interview that I saw with this guy who basically solved this whole, it was like a sort of a scavenger contest that he had in his videos. And they were looking for Mal Evans' briefcase or something. Because I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with Mal Evans?
I'm very familiar with Mal Evans, yes.
Yeah, you know, it was rumored that Mal Evans had are you familiar with how he died?
Yeah, he died.
Yeah,
he was waving around a BB gun on his porch there, and he got shot by the police. Same cop who investigated the RFK assassination happened to be involved in the death of Mal Evans.
So that was a pretty suspicious death. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm Phony was promoting was that they had maybe they said they had a briefcase that belonged to Mal Evans, and they were kind of, the subtext of what they were hinting at basically is people are thinking, oh, maybe it'll be this manuscript he is supposed to have, or there'll be a copy of that there. And there is a manuscript. That's not just a rumor. His actual wife literally confirmed that, but nobody's ever seen it. I mean, it's never been released in the public domain. So what that manuscript said, but a lot of people, I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but he figures pretty highly in all the Paul is Dead lore. Like supposedly after some surgeries happened, the replacement Paul was going around in Africa with this Mal Evans fella. So yeah, anyway.
But you were saying that the I Am a Phony video series that you could find on YouTube, you're saying that you think that was sponsored by the Beatles?
Yes, by Beatles Inc., basically. I think they're basically, there's a group of people, and Neil Aspinall was one of the main figures involved. And after Neil Aspinall died, financial records were actually released where you can actually see him. He had a company that was called, I believe it was either Stand Up or Standby Productions. That was a movie production company, and they had hired that Billy Martin guy. And there were financial papers that belonged to Mr. Neil Aspinall that were actually released where you could see where he was getting these large amounts of money, and some of it was being paid to creditors. We're talking about like £200,000 for a couple of months. It's like a lot of money was being moved around. But he was also posting, allegedly, well, there's a rumor that Neil Aspinall was posting under another identity to these Paul is Dead forums. And it was this very eloquent kind of riddles that he was posting. And then Neil Aspinall died, and this user on these forums stopped posting. But basically, that Billy Martin guy, he did an interview where he said he was part of a group that Neil Aspinall was kind of the key figure, so to speak. He was kind of reluctant to talk about Paul himself's involvement or to go into any details on who the Paul person was. I think the videos, it's kind of a disinformation format where they're really cool, and it puts out a lot of stuff, but it puts out a lot of contradictory stuff. So the main theory, you see this theory coming up over and over about this car accident that's supposed to happen. And, the only car accident, you've heard A Day in the Life, where they talk about he blew his mind out in a car.
Right.
They're not actually saying a car accident happened, though, in the song, but there's a guy named Tara Brown who died, and they say it's about him. But I don't think Paul died in a car accident at all. I actually think he's John Halliday, possibly, which that was actually, the Halliday thing came out in an I Am a Phony video too, but it had already been in the press. It leaked out. People were going on these. So John Halliday, this guy that really looks a lot like the first Paul, he has a much smaller face. He basically, he was giving the National Trust in England, hired this Halliday guy to give tours of the original McCartney home. And if you're familiar with these Paul is Dead theories, basically the guy who we end up knowing now is Paul McCartney. He has a much longer face. The other Paul was much shorter. You can actually, one thing, corresponding with Thomas U. Harriot, one of the things he mentions is you can actually look at the proportion of his bass guitar to his body to tell if it's the first guy, but they mix up, they do a lot of tricks, weird things with them. I think it's easy to pull off the whole Paul is Dead hoax when it first came off in the 60s, but I'm not sure if it was, I don't know if they were using it as a marketing campaign or if it was because he had naturally been replaced. So in 1964, there was an interview, and the first Paul McCartney did this interview with David Frost, the Frost-Nixon guy.
Sure.
And he asked and the two Pauls there, they couldn't be more different. The first guy was much more soft-spoken. He only played bass. And the second guy is basically a studio musician who, he plays at pretty much every instrument. He's a composer. But so the first guy, David Frost, asked first Paul, where do you see yourself? And Paul says, well, in 2 years, I see myself as hopefully retired and rich. And ironically, that's 64. And this whole narrative that they keep floating with the whole car accident, which is the thesis not only in the original Paul is Dead theory, but also in Memoirs of Billy Shears, it all revolves around this whole car accident, which I don't believe happened. I believe he was replaced by. So initially, there was so the first we ever pretty much heard of Paul is Dead phenomenon started in America, much more than the UK, when in 1969, a DJ out of Detroit, Michigan, did this show about how Paul hadn't been seen in public in a long time, yada, yada. And he went into all the album clues from Sgt. Pepper's and stuff like that. And he went into some of the back messages. And basically it revolved around a lot of the clues. But I kind of think it's the way that it looks to me now. I don't think any of that was by accident. And I think if it just happened naturally, it would have, I think if that had happened, if the Paul is Dead thing had blown up in the UK like it did in the US, the results would have been a lot different. And the man who I believe actually replaced Paul would have been outed a long time ago.
Let me ask you this,
Yeah.
because we're pretty much on the same page here. Okay, I don't think he was. I think he was replaced, and I don't think he's dead either. What do you think, first of all, was the motive for replacing Paul?
I'm kind of I've got a few theories on that. I think there could have been a car accident. I don't think there necessarily was one, though. When you really look at the timeline, there could. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, there could have been a car accident where he just got injured, but I don't even know about that. There's pictures of McCartney with a cane, several pictures, and it's the first guy. It's but. And they're post 66 pictures, so it doesn't really fit with. But I think it was probably. I think it had more to do with musicianship than anything else. I think the other guy probably just wanted out, and it was more of a showbiz thing. So, I don't know. There's a lot of the guy. Even in the book Memoirs of Billy Shears, they go into a lot of the Masonic stuff, and if you really look at the Beatles albums, you can see them. There's just tons of Masonic imagery. Like you can see him doing the hidden hand of Javelin, whatever. And doing the little 666s, the little 4s, all kinds of satanic imagery. Even if you really look closely on Sgt. Pepper, they organize the people on the album cover, sort of like a Masonic temple, where each powerful person is a pillar. There's all this really esoteric stuff involved.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of that stuff on there. We were talking off the air about the movie Echo Canyon, this documentary that just came out about Laurel Canyon and all these musicians there. And the guy from the Byrds is on there, and he's talking about how in England and Britain, all the Stones and the Beatles, when they wanted to record over there, they had to go to Abbey Road because it was the only place. Abbey Road Studios was the only place you could go to record if you were a musician. And he said to me, and they even show a scene. He says all the engineers used to walk around in white lab coats. And then they show
I've seen those pictures.
Yeah, they show a picture of it, and these guys are like scientists walking around in white lab coats. And he said, and if we wanted to change something, even if you wanted to increase the bass, you'd have to go to them and say, excuse me, can we increase the bass on this? And they would rub their chin and say, well, we'll see what we can do. It was like it was tight control over the music being produced over there at Abbey Studios.
See, I think you bring up a good point, which goes into what I actually believe about why he was replaced.
Okay.
So the original Paul was a mediocre bass player at best. And by the way, it's been proven. There's a university, I forget the name of the university professor, as far back as the late 60s or early 70s. He literally did a voice comparison of the Beatles records from the early days and compared them to the latter Beatles records from the late 60s. And you could tell it was obviously not the same man. The original Paul's voice was a lot deeper. But I think one of the major motives was, so George Martin was really a studio perfectionist, right? And in the guy he chose to replace Paul, he had an ally because this man was a professional studio musician. He was basically a prodigy. He could play pretty much every instrument. And basically, when they brought in the new Paul, John Lennon had to relinquish his control. He had been the leader of the Beatles.
Right.
Ever since what were they originally called? That had a cheesy name. I forget.
The Bonesmen or something like that? Yeah.
Huh?
The Bonesmen or something? What was it?
You almost had it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the Something Men.
Yeah.
Not the Journeymen.
But whatever. Let's say
it's going to bug me. But, so John Lennon had always been the leader. But that changed, and the addition of Yoko, I think, coincides with this whole replacement. A lot of stuff happened really fast. You have to look at the timeline. So, in I believe it was...
The Quarrymen.
Quarrymen. That's it. No, I'm not going to be thinking about that in my head for like an hour. Right. So I believe it was 1967. Epstein died.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, you're right. There was all this a series of events. Epstein died, which was, and they were shook up over that. You can see they were shook up over that, right?
Right, definitely. But I think so. Even by the official narrative. So there's this book, Memoirs of Billy Shears. This book basically continues on with the same narrative that was used on those radio programs, but it elaborates into a lot of details, and it has such detailed information in this book that, and I've read Beatles biographies, and they're not just taking it from the biographies. There's just obscure trivia, and but they also mix it with disinformation too. But it purports to be a book. So there's a book called Memoirs of Billy Shears by this guy Thomas E.U. Harriot. It came out in 2009, and this kind of coincides with what I was telling you about in 2006. George Martin had that contest.
Right.
So in 2009, Thomas E.U. Harriot releases a book, and it's 666 pages, called Memoirs of Billy Shears. And it's a huge book, and it basically goes into all the stuff and just lays everything out. But but he admits to being a studio musician. He says he's a studio musician. He even says he's in the Campbell family, which that wasn't new to the book. That actually was in when the original radio broadcast. There's this guy, William Campbell, who was the guitar player for Marmalade, and him and Dean Ford were a songwriting pair, basically. But he was born in 1947, so he's a lot younger than the original Paul. He was closer in age to like David Bowie. But yeah, so but the book doesn't really say it's William Campbell. The book says it's this guy, William Shepard. But the book presents itself as a work of fiction for legal reasons, right? Mm. And supposedly the legal reasons are that he had to sign like an NDA or like secrets oath in the whole National Security Act in Britain. If Paul, I thought Paul was he knighted twice, or were there just two separate ceremonies?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He's knighted ultimately. Yeah, Sir Paul. Now,
yeah.
Who do you think then? Who do you think is the replacement Paul, the new Paul? You traced it back.
I think it's so. Like I said, there's this guy called William Campbell, right, who's from the Campbell clan, and comes from an extremely rich family. The guy in the Shears Memoirs of Billy Shears group, he mentions the Campbell clan, but he doesn't mention Junior. See, if you Google William Campbell just by itself, you're gonna find like the American TV producer. I had to like really look into this, and I came across this guy called Junior Campbell, and his name is William Junior Campbell. Basically, before he had previously been going by William Campbell when he was in Marmalade, but after that interview where his name accidentally got outed, they actually said, yeah, the name William Campbell actually came out in one of these radio programs. And so I think that was by accident. I don't believe that was by design. And I think the book actually tries to discredit that because there's all this stuff. Like, so in one of the things in the book is there's a song that was written by somebody named Bill Campbell, and it's not the same guy as William Campbell, but he says that it was this William Campbell guy writing it, but he would have had to be 10. So they throw in the strangest disinformation into that book. There's also a lot of useful facts. But I basically, this William Campbell guy, this group Marmalade, they're the group that did the song Reflections of My Life.
Okay.
He looks an awful lot similar to Paul. I found his YouTube channel, and a lot of the pictures don't even look like him, but in some of you can see over time that his appearance changed. And I even found an interview with Junior Campbell or William Campbell from the late 60s, and they were interviewing him, and they're like, well, and it was in Scotland, and he was just being himself. as William Campbell from Marmalade, and he was leaving Marmalade. This is really at the height of when the Beatles were getting back in gear after like a brief hiatus, basically. So they say, oh, William Campbell, or what's left of him. And I believe he had some surgery. I mean, if you really look at pictures of William Campbell with his beard, William Jr. Campbell, and compare it to Paul McCartney from Let It Be, when he was walking around with the beard, is basically almost like looking at the exact same guy.
Let me ask you this, though, because when I looked this up, when you sent this to me, I looked up William Jr. Campbell. There's pictures of him today, and it's not the same guy we see walking around as Paul McCartney.
There's makeup and prosthetics he wears, so I'm not entirely sure that's him. A lot of people think that it's Phil Acro, this other guy who was in the band The Diplomats. But I'm not. I think it was Junior, due to the William Campbell guy recorded the Beatles' La Di with Marmalade before the Beatles recorded it. And there's a lot of stuff that, it's not in that. They don't really go into Junior. So other things like, this William Campbell guy, he composes music for that Thomas the Tank Train.
Oh, really?
And Ringo, hello?
Yeah, Thomas the Tank, are you talking about? Did I lose you?
What?
You're talking about Thomas the Tank?
Yeah, so William Campbell composes the music for Thomas the Tank Train, and Ringo is on there all the time. And there's just all sorts of things. So recently, Dean Ford, the guy who was William Campbell's bandmate, they were kind of like Lennon and McCartney before the fake Lennon McCartney. So yeah, it's so funny how there's like an alternate history of the Beatles. This guy who currently goes by Paul, whether you agree that it's William Campbell, whether you come to believe that or it's someone else, I'm not entirely sure for 100% that it is Junior Campbell. I'm just sure that he's been replaced. It's obvious. And the second guy, I mean, George hated him. If you ever watch the extras from the Beatles anthology, you can tell this guy just bullshits and makes up parts of their stories. And I'm sorry for swearing.
That's okay.
And George, he had to correct him, and he just gets really irritated to the point where they almost come to blows.
Yeah, it seems like that Ringo doesn't take a lot of nonsense. We got to take a commercial break. We're going to come back with more of James Pastel right after these messages. We're talking about the theory it's called the Paul is dead theory, but both James and I agree that there's no reason to believe that Paul is dead, but that we both agree that he was replaced. I don't think anybody could deny he was replaced. So we're going to get back into this more. I want to ask you when we come back, because you told me, too, about a movie called Give My Regards to Broad Street. And you say there's a lot of clues in there that they're leaving us. So we'll get right back more into this with James Pastel right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. AlmightyGold.com. Get your gold in affordable quantities. 1 gram, 2.5 grams, 5 grams, no minimum purchase required. Why save in paper when you can save in gold? AlmightyGold.com understands it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. No one can afford an ounce of gold. This is why Almighty Gold has introduced to you Carat Bars, a most reliable company where you can buy gold in minor quantities from as little as 1/10 of a gram. That's like $6. Each gold bar is inset into the Carat Bar frame, which is a standard credit card size, and it's covered by a safety laminate. It's imprinted with a unique DNA for counterfeit protection and provided with a blacklight authenticity signature on the front. Gold, AlmightyGold.com. They have a cryptocurrency backed in gold, and you can become an affiliate at AlmightyGold.com and make a commission from any gold that is purchased from your affiliate link. It's contact us at almightygold.com. That's their email address. Contact us at almightygold.com. Gold! Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe add new point-of-sale locations across the country quickly, or bring in revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services to your office building, warehouse, or lobby? CartKing.com is the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, food carts, and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, KartKing.com has been working with clients across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. That's www.kart-king.com. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. So you go to the website, KartKing.com, you check out their different designs and models. You pick out which design applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, and ship it worldwide. KartKing.com. PureSoapFlakes.com. 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com, GreenHome.com, Amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with James Pastel, and we're talking about the theory that it's commonly known as Paul is dead, PID for short. But I never understood why people assumed he was dead. You know, he could be replaced without being dead, but there's this theory out there, and it goes by clues. Well, they gave all these clues about a car crash. But if they're the ones responsible for swapping them out, well, that's not a good source to believe. I'll tell you something else, too, real quick. I had May Pang on the show, who was John Lennon's girlfriend on the Lost Weekend there in California. And I asked her, I says, hey, what do you think about that Paul is dead theory? And she goes, oh, no, he's not dead. I saw them both at the same time. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's insane.
I know. And she's such a sweetheart, too. You know, I couldn't really get too tough on her.
Did she say that off air?
No, on air. I have a clip of it,
I
man.
I listened to your interview with May Tang. That's nuts.
Yeah.
I must not have listened to the whole thing.
I saw them both at the same time.
How did she say it? Did she say it like in a joke? Like,
No. She said, no, but you could have misunderstood and said she meant that she saw Paul and John at the same time. But it really sounds like she's talking about she saw both Pauls at the same time. But you got to listen to it. You got to catch it.
Did you ask her to clarify? Did she elaborate on that at all, or did you follow up?
Well, no, I think we settled that she was talking about John and Paul. But it really sounds like she slipped up and she said that she saw them both Pauls. And there is a photograph, too, of two Pauls on a boat. Did you look at that? What did you find about that?
I heard about that. Yeah, okay. I thought that I thought there was actually more than two, but I think I know the photograph you're talking about.
And there's just a million stories about the two Pauls. But you were telling me about this film called Give My Regards to Broad Street, and you say there's a bunch of clues in there. What are the clues, and why would they have clues in there?
Well, the most obvious one that actually made it into one of the I Am a Phony video is he's walking into the BBC, and they're introducing Paul to this other guy. And they're like, oh, let me introduce you to William. They say, you know William, right? Mm. That's the one everybody talks about, but my favorite one is actually right after they play, when he drives to Paul McCartney's old man's house, his dad's house. There's this scene, and he's basically in his house, and Paul's dad says, what are you doing here, slumming? And there's all these little clues with the clock, and there's Campbell Plaid, and all. The movie doesn't really allude to any car accident, but what the movie is actually about is it's about Paul in the movie basically has this friend who runs off with a bunch of his recordings, and it's like he stole them. And I think symbolically what they're going through, and they do all these crazy, there's even this crazy scene that's shot in where they resort back to medieval times and somebody gets killed. But I don't think, I think the only death of Paul that's happened is symbolically, but lost my train of thought. But basically, the whole thing of the movie seems to be about the conflict that's happening because this replacement doesn't get to take credit for the actual Paul songs that he wrote under his real name, or that he feels guilty because the other guy doesn't get the credit reserved that he deserves for his song, because he's using the other guy's name, basically. And I believe the other guy's alive. I think he was paid probably a lump sum. In Memoirs of Billy Shears, he basically says that he was paid to take over the identity of Paul McCartney, and that he had to get Paul's brother, Mike McGear, on board. It's interesting because on one of those programs in America that happened, it was actually a TV program, Mike McCartney, using the name Mike McGear, actually appeared on this program, debunking the Paul is Dead series with, I think they had the original University of Michigan radio DJ who actually had done that broadcast. And so in the book, he basically says that the McCartney family got a chunk of money, and he made good friends he became like close to Mike. And it talks about all this stuff, even so the first Paul had been dating Jane Asher, right?
Right. Well, before you get into that, Mike McCartney, it's interesting too because people say, well, why wouldn't he talk? But he had some kind of allegations against him, some kind of sexual abuse, sexual assault charges that were suddenly dropped. So it's like they can kind of hang things over your head to make you keep quiet. So it's not.
I'm sure
there's a carrot and a stick. They give you some money, but then they also got stuff over you, and it would be easy to have blackmail dirt over the original Paul McCartney too, because God knows what they were doing in Hamburg and all that kind of stuff. God only knows what they were up to, and then all the connections to the Process Church we were talking about off the air as well. But what were you about to say?
One thing that happened, I think maybe Tina Foster brought this up, but there was a woman who had a child with the first Paul, a German woman. You mentioned Germany. And she, it was documented in the courts and everything, and he was legally paying her child support. Well, when the other guy took over the identity, he had to make a settlement with this lady, or I can't remember, I think, or did he just cut her off? But eventually he stopped paying her. In the 80s, he had to take a DNA. Or not they couldn't do DNA in the 80s, could they?
No.
Eventually he had to do a DNA test because he wasn't paying support, and DNA didn't match. And there's this ongoing litigation with that. And the lady was shocked. But, yeah, there's a lot of weird little things like that. One thing that figures kind of prominently in the Memoirs of Billy Shears book is they're in the 80s. Paul McCartney was busted for pot in Japan, and in the book he explains it in such an entitled way, like he was just usually allowed to carry weed in his bags. But the reason he was detained was initially the weed, but he was detained for a freaking week, right? So imagine James Paul McCartney on marijuana in Japan. I know they're pretty thin, but marijuana. No, what does happen? They had a record. They had a copy of his old passport. Then when the Beatles, right, exactly.
Yeah, as well. You were about to say something about Jane Asher's first, right around the time of the swap, and then he's in the eat, and he's with her 24 hours a day for how many years? 30 years. Never left her side. They never left each other. They never slept apart one night.
And she was buried in Campbelltown.
So what's the significance of where she was buried?
She's buried in Campbelltown. He buried her in Campbelltown, right? All of a sudden, Paul McCartney gets this Liverpool lad just buys a place in, the middle of nowhere in Scotland. It's Junior Campbell's from Glasgow, and Campbelltown is actually, named after the famous Campbell clan. And the man that I think replaced him came from a very wealthy, well-to-do family, basically came from a line of Scottish lords. And I think he went there for privacy. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the footage where they took that picture after Paul hadn't. It was a cover of Time, and it's like, Paul really is a lot.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I saw that. Yeah.
There's actually YouTube footage of when they went out there to do that, and it was the second Paul, and he was infuriated. And yeah, so that's how that all.
So you're mentioning
but
Jane Asher, right? His first girlfriend.
Oh, right.
Wait.
Asher,
Let me add a couple of things first, though, because she was in Alice in Wonderland. First of all, okay, she was the actress in Alice in Wonderland, Jane Asher, in the play. Now her brother, I think, and maybe it was Paul Asher, turns out to be the manager for James Taylor.
Yeah.
And James, by the way, and there was some kind of process connection too to Paul Asher.
Yeah, I think Paul and his roommate were connected to Indica Books as well.
Right, but James Taylor ran into Mark David Chapman the weekend he shot John Lennon. So they have little 6 degrees of a separation there too.
I've researched the John Lennon. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we can get into that too one day. We can have you come back. But what do you have to tell us about Jane Asher?
Okay, so Jane Asher was the first Paul's girlfriend.
Right.
If you notice, so when the second Paul got together, so when he was replaced, she was actually paid a sum to continue dating him as far as the press was concerned. And the replacement actually thought, according to memoirs of Billy Shears, the replacement thought that that he'd be able to go on dating her and everything would be hunky dory. But if you look at a lot of the photos from when they went to see the Maharishi,
yeah,
you can just see Jane Asher looked so up. Every picture where he tried to be by her, she just had an awful look on her face. Like she just looked angry as all get up. And basically they had to settle with and kind of buy her silence. I don't know how long that went, but yeah, she did not like the replacement, whatever.
She had an interesting career too, because she was a theatrical actress. You know, she was in showbiz. You know, and so was her brother. But you don't hear nothing about her now. No interviews, no nothing. Why wouldn't she be doing interviews? You know, the first Paul McCartney girlfriend. You'd think her name would come out.
She probably signed an NDA about that. Yeah, that's why. You bring up a good point, because any interview she's going to do, that's going to be one of the first things that comes up.
Right.
And not only is it an unhappy time in her life, but it's inconvenient.
It's kind of odd, too, that the Paul that's running around now, the Paul, you know, that we see, he married Heather Mills, who was one of Adnan Khashoggi's girls. And it also seemed, too, because I remember watching live when he was shown the pictures and the tabloid pictures saying, hey, did you know that she worked for Adnan Khashoggi? And he saw this. It was during their divorce. The tabloids published this, and they sprung it on him. There's a video of it, and he was in shock. Now, what do you make of that, though? And how was she inserted into his life?
I don't know if she was. So I think the people who handle Paul were probably looking for a Linda replacement.
Right.
Linda was basically involved in a lot of charitable causes like landmines. Ideologically, they went together really well. They were both from very rich families. She was from the Eastman Kodak money, and but Heather Mills, I think, was more of somebody to basically keep track of him. I don't think that she was naive going into it. I think she knew that. See, what's interesting is when they were going to get divorced, you've probably seen all the stuff where she says, oh, if you know the truth, it's just so terrible. And they ask her if she's talking about him having an affair.
Right.
And she's talking about a secret that would shock the world if the world were to know. And she's like, no, it's not about an affair. And that's when they were going through their divorce, but they hadn't obviously come to an arrangement. Eventually they did, because she stopped talking. But, yeah, there's quite a bit of hostility between the two, and the British press was crucifying. I think she was kind of a sleazy person. I mean, you pointed out her background.
Yeah, for sure.
And she's definitely no Heather Mills. I think she didn't like that. Basically, this guy is, like the replacement guy, I mean, you'll see him on TV and stuff, but he truly has a love for music. The first Paul could only play the bass. You see this guy playing pretty much every instrument, and he loves to collaborate with people. He did an album with that guy you mentioned. He does secret albums. Like there's this album this band. I think it's called the Firemen.
Right.
That kind of did like a techno type thing. And he didn't even announce his involvement with that. And it was with a lot of the people who were involved in the I'm a Phony project. And yeah, he's much more into working with musical people just for that. But I think he probably values his privacy, and it's awkward. But I think it's kind of becoming a known secret. Like if you watch, I believe it was Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon, he's had him on the show a ton of times. Either Jimmy Fallon or Conan has happened, and he said, you're my favorite, Paul. You're my favorite Paul McCartney. They were talking about the whole Paul is dead thing. And then Jeff Fallon's like, well, you're my favorite Paul McCartney. I don't think he said replacement, but of course he was obviously trying to be just tongue in cheek. But there's also a video of Mike Myers. So apparently Mike Myers and Lorne Michaels are in on this too, because Mike Myers, there's an interview where he actually calls him William, talking about Paul. And he's just casually talking about him. He just accidentally slips his tongue and says William. This stuff is like, and there's a video of John Lennon and George Harrison. It's from the footage of the Imagine footage, and they're all sitting at a making of the Imagine, I think, and they're all sitting at the table, and they go, Beatles Bill's doing such and such, and they kind of chuckle or something. See, I think that song. Have you heard the song, that John Lennon song? How Do You Sleep?
Right.
Where he's like, those freaks were right. I think that's actually not about. A lot of people are like, oh, that proves Paul's dead. Well, I think he's actually singing that to the first Paul, not the second one, because I think he lost an ally basically when the first Paul stepped down, and
well, let me
I'm
ask
really
you a question.
curious what.
Tina Foster seems to think that even Lennon was replaced, and there's a lot. If you look at the old Lennon and this current
It's
Lennon,
possible.
yeah.
There's a movie. Have you seen? There's a film that came out a few years back that was. It used to be on YouTube, but now you can only find excerpts of it. That was called Let Him Be, and there's this guy in it named Mark Spacer, and he basically. He plays an older John Lennon, and the thesis of the film is that Lennon faked his film, and these Canadian kids find him living out in obscurity in the middle of nowhere. And this guy's girlfriend, nobody's girlfriend, basically ends up dating him and figures out that he's John Lennon. And the guy is like, he can sing just like John Lennon, and he looks like him. But what's interesting is they show him putting on just makeup to look like him. And he could really pass for John Lennon. Oh, it's bizarre. His name's Mark Spacer. So yeah, there's a lot of theories about there being a fake Lennon. They call him Fennon, I think. Maybe even more than one. I don't know how substantial, I don't know how true or untrue this is, but nothing would surprise me at this point. I think that as far as John Lennon, I don't think he'd allow himself to be replaced, first of all, in the way that Paul was replaced, because I just don't believe that's his personality. Of course, these people it's kind of funny. You think of John Lennon, even his name, Lennon, like if it wasn't for John Lennon, who knows where communism would be today with Leninists. To me, that almost seems calculated, but I don't know. His persona, he just seems so not like the type of guy who would step down, but who knows, man? I know more on the Paul side.
Yeah, because the whole thing with Lennon was mysterious too. Because you have Yoko Ono, who's from the Hirohito family. She's this millionaire.
Oh yeah,
this millionaire banking family.
Doesn't she come from a line of Japanese samurais?
Yeah, it's just so bizarre, And then that whole business.
Didn't she have a connection to the process as well? Wasn't her ex-husband? Didn't they have to kidnap her daughter back from these Scientologists or something?
Well, he became involved with a Christian cult after they tried to kidnap. After they did kidnap her kid, and he had to take off in hiding. And he's another one that won't do any interviews. And then there was an arrest of a butler that they had who had all kinds of material, and he wanted to publish a book, and he was arrested. Oh, so much shenanigans with that whole bunch. Assassination attempts against George. just one thing after another,
George's death was kind of interesting. Well, I don't think anything specific, but there was an interesting thing that happened when he died where the press printed the wrong thing about the house he died in. He was actually living in a mansion that had been owned by Courtney Love.
Oh, really?
Or no, McCartney was when George died, and George died in that mansion. But it wasn't, he didn't own it. Paul did. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's interesting. Because Courtney Love's up to her neck and all kinds of stuff, too.
Yeah, on Epstein's plane.
Yeah.
I haven't heard her name come up lately, though, about in regards to Epstein, even though she was in that black book.
Yeah, you wonder, why wouldn't she be interviewed about that? Now that Epstein's front page news all over the place.
I've heard her asked about it before when that came up, and she tries to say that he basically just gave her stock tips, but I don't buy that. I think isn't it interesting that Courtney Love, she was having enough problems managing the Nirvana money without needing stock tips from Jeffrey Epstein. Isn't it interesting that if she was doing anything for Epstein, I'll guarantee you that she was helping him procure women.
Exactly.
Probably,
I've had her father on the show.
Involved in entertainment.
Yeah, I've interviewed her father many times. He talks about her being involved in that kind of activity. And also, too, don't forget, too, she was also down there the day before Versace got killed. She just happened to be there, too.
Oh, yeah. I know. That is. She actually took a bunch of, she knows Gianni.
Yeah.
And she actually not Gianni, sorry. What's the name of Versace's sister? Gianni's
I know who you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
She's good friends with Versace's sister, who now runs that business. She actually took a bunch of his famous pieces right after he died. It's kind of interesting.
It's just fascinating. Now we're just about out of time, though. So if you just want to, how do you want to wrap this up and give us your thesis here of what do you think about Paul is dead? Paul is alive.
I'm sorry if I've kind of been rambling.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I don't know. Ask me something. I believe that the Beatles. So here's my thoughts on not just Paul is dead, but the Beatles in general. I think they were kind of you have to look at when the Beatles basically, right after JFK was assassinated, the Beatles kind of calmed things down. And you have to look at them in the context of a band that's involved in cultural engineering. And I'm sure you've heard all about Tavistock. And when you mix that with the intelligence world and just the entertainment business in general, nobody should be that shocked if Paul was replaced. I think it was easy to pull it off back then before in a pre-internet world. Because it took me, my mom was a huge host of this, and took me to actually convince her, but she's upset with it. And she's, and I mentioned juniors, all sorts. Some people say it's William Jr. Campbell. Some people say it's Phil Ackrell. Other people say it's Vivian Stanchel or Denny Lane. But it doesn't even really matter who replaced Paul. What matters is that it happened. And I kind of I think initially if people were to find out the truth and it were to become publicly known, I think that they're trying to put out this narrative of sympathy from people. Even the fake name and memorizability name being Shepherd. Shepherd means blessed is he. Shepherd, they will kind of one of the wings. When with wings, that's the that he was in, and there's this
right
and talk to us today. Well, that about me with
so and a lot of people. So man, so thank you. Come up.
One more thing, the album Ram.
Yeah.
There's British intelligence and American intelligence. There's this procedure they can do called rapid appearance modification. I found out and they actually have facilities for this. And I think in addition to the sacrificial sort of theme of the ram and him holding the horns, I think that it's also sort of a sort of symbolic, replacing the McCartney almost like, but it's, I think it also is like sort of code for that maybe too, but you can pick those things you can't prove. There's all kinds of little things like that.
So James, if people want to find you, how can they get a hold of you?
jdpastel@gmail.com.
Okay, great. jdpastel@gmail.com. And you got a Twitter handle, a Facebook, anything like that you want to promote?
No, I don't need to plug anything.
Okay,
but,
James.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
No, thank you so much, man. Great stuff and great content. Thank you so much, brother.
Take it easy, Ed.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Bye.
Okay, so then we had James Pastel with his theory about that not Paul is dead, but that Paul was replaced. And he sent me reams and reams and reams of emails, all kinds of clues in this movie. Give my regards to Broad Street. The Memoirs of Billy Shears is a book you could find. It has a bunch of clues in it, too, as well. But just, even if you just look at the recent Paul McCartney, if you look at all the Beatles, right? Paul McCartney still has the same kind of haircut. You never see him with a short crew cut or any other kind of haircut than the same kind of mop top kind of type haircut that he had way back then. He's the only one of the Beatles that hasn't gone through a lifetime of different type of hairstyles. So anyway, thank you so much, James Pastel. If you like tonight's show, check out OppermanReport.com. I got a show in our members section that I did with, who's that woman? I forget her name. But I did a Paul is Dead show in the members section too as well. That is just a train wreck. I gotta tell you, it is just a train wreck, man, where this woman, I would ask a question, she would just go on for 2 hours and would just lecturing me on how to conduct an investigation. It was incredible. So that's in the members section there too as well. Check it out. OppermanReport.com is our members section. That's what keeps us on the air. You can support the show by subscribing. There's over 200 shows in there, so over 440 hours of shows. Exclusive you can't find anywhere else. If you want to find our archives with the Tina Foster shows and the May Pang show and the shows I've done about John Lennon's death, and you can go to Spreaker.com, Spreaker.com. Then look up Opperman Report, and you sign up for free. You follow the show. You get an email anytime there's a live show, and there's a chat room in there too, and you can search for all my old shows there, May Pang, or John Lennon, you just put in, or you put in Paul McCartney or Paul is Dead, and they'll all pop up, and you can find them there and listen to them there. I know a lot of people, we got a lot of new members at OppermanReport.com members section, and a lot of new Twitter followers at Opperman Report on Twitter, and a lot of new followers on Spreaker since we started on KCAA, AM/FM there in California, right after Alan Warren's House of Mystery. Alan comes on at 9 p.m. and we come on at 10 p.m. So we've had a real good success with increasing our followers and our stuff like that. But if you want to support the show and become a member, that's OppermanReport.com. You sign up there as little as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. But I'll give you a discount if you contact me directly, because we're trying to raise money here. We're in the last ditch here trying to get Victoria off to college, and we have to rent a car. We need plane tickets, hotel rooms, and stuff like that. We're leaving August 16th. I can't believe my little girl's leaving off to college. You guys, remember listening to her here when she was a little kid. She used to come on our show. Just a child, 11 years old, 12 years old. Anyway, so we're leaving August 16th, and we need to raise funds. So if you want a discount on the members section, you can contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com, and I'll give you 13 months for $65 through PayPal. And that cash will get to me directly. We can use it. We need about a good 20 memberships to cover all these newest expenses we have here. So thank you so much, guys. Good night.